All right, so this is your tour guide, Michael Kojo. Gradually, we made it to the favorite part of the tour. That is Cape Coast. Not that I'm being biased, this is where I come from. And Cape Coast is one of the highlights on this tour. So I believe you're going to stay with us and really learn everything that we are going to share with you in Cape Coast. Behind me is the infamous Cape Coast Castle. As we learn about the transatlantic slave trade, Cape Coast Castle play a major role. And we are going to take the tour of the castle, still in solemn refreshing like we did at the Slave River. We are going to have the same experience. And today we are very lucky. In our midst is the man that is the most sought after tour guide in terms of slavery. When you come to Cape Coast Castle, this is the guy you should look for. Justice is the name. He is going to be our guide for today, and please be attentive to listen to Justice as he takes us through the tour of the Cape Coast Castle. Thank you.
Right in front of me was a male dungeons, and today we'll visit a lot of places within the Cape Coast Castle dungeons. So right above us, over there was a Pallava Hall. So the Pallava Hall actually served as a slave market or the auction block. So the enslaved Africans were sold to the European merchants at the Pallava Hall, and from the Pallava Hall, the Courtyard. Another horrible thing took place here. Human beings were branded. The various companies that purchased the enslaved Africans had their names under a piece of metal, or a logo under a piece of metal. The whole thing was placed into fire. So the whole thing was red hot. Either your hand, your chest, or your back was stamped with that hot metal. After branding the enslaved Africans, the male dungeons were there. The women had their dungeon about 60 meters from here. And another intriguing thing I want to draw your attention to, right above the male slave dungeon was the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. So ironically, whilst God was worshipped, whilst they sang the hymns, others died and suffered right beneath where God was worshipped. So I'll take you through the male dungeons. This is the historic Cape Coast Castle. This structure dates back to the 17th century. It was built by the English around 1665. But previously, this structure changed hands severally. The Europeans knew its importance in gold, ivory, and later on enslaved Africans. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to explore the coast of West Africa. They arrived around 1482. 10 years later, they constructed Elmina Castle. 1482, the first European structure in sub-Saharan Africa was constructed. The name was St. George's Castle. It was also known as Elmina Castle. The same Portuguese occupied this piece of land around 1555 and gave it the name Cabo Corso. Cabo Corso is a Portuguese word. English, you can say Short Cape. So in natural sense, this town had the name Cape Coast from the nature of its coast. It's a small cape. So the Portuguese actually constructed a small wooden lodge, but later the Portuguese abandoned this space. Sweden took over around 1653. The Swedish built a fort and named it Carolusbeck. The Danes fought the Swedish and took over. The Dutch fought the Danes, and at exactly 1664, the British also fought the Dutch, defeated them, and took over. So the British enlarged that small fortress into something like this today. And it took the English more than 200 years of rebuilding, demolishing, and addition before eventually they came out with something like this. And also, when we talk about castles and forts along the coast of West Africa, we had more than 60 of them along the coast of West Africa. And interestingly, Ghana had over 90% of all the forts and castles West Africa had. We had the majority because of gold. Gold was the primary reason for the coming of the Europeans around 1471. So all the Europeans wanted to enjoy from that gold trade. But unfortunately, as time went on, the attention shifted to that of human beings. Around the mid-1500s, the transatlantic slave trade evolved. I'm talking about Cape Coast Castle. It was actually built for the transatlantic slave trade, not the gold trade. It was built at a time where you could make a lot of money from the sale of human beings than the sale of gold. The European colonies in the West Indies, the Caribbeans, Virgin Islands, North America, South America demanded human labor. And unfortunately again, Africans were seen as the best candidate. The male slave dungeon. This dungeon accommodated over 1,000 enslaved men bound to the West Indies, the Caribbeans, North and South America. The male dungeons consist of 5 chambers or 5 rooms, and each of these rooms accommodated over 200 men. They lived in these dungeons for about 3 months before the next ship arrived. While they were here waiting on the ships, they did all the normal things human beings do here. They had to go to the toilet, they had to urinate, they had to sleep, they had to eat right here. When you take a closer look on the floor, you find gutters. The gutters were there for toilet and urine to pass through them into the ocean. But I normally ask this question. Look at the tiny nature of these gutters. How many times could toilet and urine move out of these dungeons? So the fact is, these items did not move at all. It got stacked up right here. It got piled up, and centuries of feces, urine and food piling up, this floor got covered to about centimeters high. 1974, this particular room was excavated, and after the excavation we found the original floor and the gutters. Up there were the only source of light and ventilation for about 200 men. So as a result of the inhumane conditions that existed within these dungeons, it is estimated that about 1/3 of them did not survive the conditions. Diseases like vomiting and diarrhea killed many of them. The place was extremely dark, that you couldn't even see the next person sitting beside you. Also, we should bear in mind that language was a barrier. These enslaved Africans were brought from different ethnic groups within West Africa. Some of them were brought from as far as from Mali, Burkina Faso, northern Ghana. And one of the things we should also know is they made the journey from these regions to the coast on foot. Many did not survive the journey to the coast. Many were attacked by wild animals. Others got drowned in rivers. Those who were sick and incapable of making it were left behind so that wild animals could feed on them. And also some of the sick ones were used as a bait for wild animals. Many died. So putting figures into consideration, realize that those who really died during the transatlantic slave trade outnumbered those who survived the journey. And also they left some markings on the walls. So those are archaeological markings. Some of the markings depict the level at which the feces and all the stuff they left here came up to. So that is the importance of the marks you see on the walls within this particular chamber. We are still in the dungeons, the male dungeons. We moved from the first room, we passed the second. This is the third room. And bear in mind that these rooms were opened up, but movement within these dungeons was limited. If 1,000 men were here, how can you move about? And at the end of the day, you were even weak and tied most of the time. They were in chains and in shackles. I want to show you something peculiar about this particular chamber. On the floor, you realize that you can't actually see the bricks. The bricks are all covered with what they left here over the centuries. So when I say with what they left here, I mean their toilet, their urine, blood, tears, and sweat. We are right on top of it. So if we should excavate, we'll find the bricks buried underneath this. And up there was a spy hole. Some of the soldiers will stand there and watch to know whatever was going on within this particular chamber or within the dungeons. And right above us, right above this particular chamber, was the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. You know, similar thing happened at Elmina Castle. The Portuguese constructed their church. So we have the slave auction. Above the slave auction was a Portuguese church. When the Dutch took over Elmina Castle, they did similar. Underneath the Dutch church was a female dungeon. The same thing happened over here. God was worshipped, God was praised. Hallelujah was sung up there, whilst others died, whilst others had to stay for months in their feces, blood, and urine. We shall have a closer view of the church when we move upstairs. And also we can say that the church played a role in the transatlantic slave trade. For example, the Portuguese, the Catholic Church, actually decreed the enslavement of Africans around the mid-15th century. And let me also say this, capitalism played a role in the transatlantic slave trade. It gave opportunities to businessmen, enterprises in Europe, South America, North America, the Caribbean, and the West Indies to make money. And as I speak to you now, some of these companies exist. We can talk about Wells Fargo. We can talk about Wall Street in New York. The Wall Street in New York was one of the biggest slave auctions in North America. Now we don't longer have the slave auctions. Now it's more of a stock exchange. So basically, some years ago it was human stock. Now it's stock exchange. Some universities or some colleges in the United States also benefited directly from the transatlantic slave trade. There are numerous of them. I can only mention some few, like Georgetown University, Yale, Harvard, you just name them. But on the other side, what did Africa benefit? Ago! I said Ago previously, and I guess some of you are wondering why Ago. Ago is actually an Akan word, and we use that to draw somebody's attention towards something. So just like I'm coming to your house, I cannot just barge in like that. I have to knock. So I'll say Ago. If you are ready to receive me, you respond by saying Amen. And I did this for this particular room because this room is a sacred ground. It is a sacred ground in this sense. Before the Europeans arrived, this area was a sacred ground for the locals, the Fetu or the Fanti people. The Fetu people believed in the existence of the Supreme Being or God. And it was acknowledged that God is the creator of all the natural things on earth. So if you want to communicate to God, you could communicate to God through the same natural things He created. It could be the sea, the stars, the wind, the plant, the animals, you name them. But unfortunately, when the Europeans arrived, the Fetu people had to relocate the shrine of the sacred ground. So they moved a piece of that rock that they prayed to God through to the town. Some years later, they relocated it to its original site. So when you take a critical look on the altar, you find two pieces of stones. On the first step, there's one piece. On the last step, there's another piece. So these stones were taken away from here centuries ago. Till date, we still pour libation, we still do ancestral sacrifice, and all that. So this forms part of the traditional religion. So in Ghana, we have three main religions. We have Christianity, that is a majority, followed by Islam, followed by the traditional religion. Currently, we have other minor religions like Hindu, Judaism, and all that. This is the last chamber, or this is the last room within the male slave dungeons. It was also known as the separation room or the sorting out room. If you take a good look at this room, you realize that this room is a bit brighter than all the other chambers behind you. It is brighter in the sense that when the ships arrived, they had to take those who were fit and strong enough to survive the journey. Those who were sick and unfit to survive the journey stayed behind in the dungeons till the last of them died. They didn't set them free, no. Those they deemed fit to survive the journey were chained and shackled, and gradually they moved them from here through a tunnel or a passage. So the British constructed a passage or a tunnel that connected this dungeon to the male slave dungeons. But unfortunately today we can't go through the tunnel. The tunnel is closed. The British sealed it to mark the end of the transatlantic slave trade on their part. So when we go up again, I will show you some part of the tunnel, and again I will show you the exit of the tunnel. Also, you find flowers, you find wreath. These wreaths are on behalf of people who come here to visit, to remember victims of the transatlantic slave trade. And now we have festivities like Panafest, Emancipation Day, Year of Return. We celebrate these festivities to remember our ancestors and also to bridge the gap between Africa and the diaspora. So you also find sacred stools. These are stools for the priests and priestesses. When they come, they sit on these stools. This is the courtyard of Cape Coast Castle dungeons. Some centuries back, some part of this courtyard was a burial ground or a cemetery for the Europeans only. Bear in mind that when the enslaved Africans died in the dungeons and at the condemned cells, their remains were thrown into the ocean. But interestingly, this is the only Ghanaian, or let me say the only black man the Europeans buried among them. And some of you are wondering, why was he buried here? What was so special about him? Yes, the name is Philip Kwaku. Philip Kwaku. He was actually a Wednesday born, so he was known as Kwaku. But the Europeans anglicized his name to Kwaku. He was born around 1741. His father was one of the prosperous merchants in Cape Coast. So the father gave out the son to the British for him to be educated. So Philip was sent to England at the age 11, where he was trained and educated. He was made a priest in London, and historically he became the first black man to become a priest for the Church of England. After he was ordained as a priest in England, he returned to this slave dungeon as a priest. So interestingly, around the 17th century, an African led an all-European congregation whilst his fellow Africans were right underneath him in chains and in shackles. On records, he didn't say anything for the transatlantic slave trade. He didn't say anything against it also. He died around 1816 at the age 75, and also he is remembered as one of the pioneers of Western education in this country. Western or classroom education in Ghana started right in the castles. Cape Coast Castle is an example. So right above the male dungeons, the church was also used as a classroom. I'll talk to you about the other graves also. We had some of the British buried here also. For example, this was one of the officials who died here. His name was Captain George Maclean. Maclean died around 1847 at the age 46. And beside George Maclean was the wife, Letitia Elizabeth London. She traveled from England to Cape Coast only to visit the husband, but on records, within 2 months' time, she was found dead in her husband's room. And actually, we don't know the cause of her death. The other one was a soldier by name C.B. Whitehead. He also died around 1812. It is believed that he died at the cost of defending the castle from an attack. But the thing is, these are not the only graves. In the 90s, this area was excavated. We found other unknown graves. We couldn't find any names on them, so we had to cover these graves up again. I will show you how water was stored in this castle some centuries ago. So the thing is, the British constructed water cisterns. Today we call them tanks. They had pipes to all the roofs, and all the pipes were connected to this very cistern right here, to this tank right here. So all the rainwater was stored in this. Some of this water was used for cooking, cleaning and all that. And the thing is, the Europeans were fighting among themselves. So there was a need for you to get a bigger tank. In case your castle was under siege, you had to depend on whatever you had within. So these were the tanks they stored water in some centuries ago. So you follow me, we'll walk right on top of the tunnel. You remember in the male dungeons, I mentioned that the male enslaved Africans were taken through an underground tunnel to the door of no return. We are right on top of that underground tunnel. It ran from that end to the other side. So we are right on top of it. And closer, you find cannons, you can call them guns. Behind you, there are cannonballs like this. Yes. The balls and the guns are all over the castle. The Europeans were actually fighting among themselves. Each of them wanted to have a piece of Africa, either to trade in gold or to trade in enslaved Africans. So in case anyone tried to attack the British, it could be the Dutch, the French, the Portuguese, you name them, these guns were used to defend their investment from their fellow competitors. And right there we have the Atlantic Ocean. The ships could not berth closer. The ships berthed some distance away because the water here is shallow and rocky at the same time. So at the shore, they'll put them on boats, and gradually these smaller boats will move goods or enslaved Africans to the ships. From here, the ships went westward to the Caribbean, the West Indies, North and South America. We are looking at the tunnel right now. You can come a bit closer. From the male dungeons, in chains and in shackles, the men were lined up, taken through the tunnel to the door of no return. So this was one of the spy holes where soldiers will stand and watch whilst the men were taken through. Unfortunately, we couldn't go through the tunnel from the male dungeons because both ends are sealed up. Very soon, I will show you the exit of the tunnel. Right, so behind me, or beside me, was the exit of the tunnel. From the male dungeons, the male captives were right here in chains and in shackles. Beside me again, he had another exit, right from here to the beach or to the shore. So from the tunnel, all the men were taken out this way to join the bigger ships. But this side was closed up. Now during the high tide or when the sea was rough, some of the water entered, so they closed it up. So again, from the tunnel, they created another route. From the tunnel, they were taken out that way, and out right towards the infamous door of no return. So from here, we shall have a look at the female and slave dungeons. From there, we'll go through the door of no return. While the enslaved Africans were kept in the dungeon, some rebelled, some revolted. Looking at the conditions human beings were subjected to, some wouldn't sit idle and watch. Those they captured as enslaved Africans, some of them were kings, queens, military leaders, political leaders in their various communities, towns, or villages. So many rebelled and revolted. Again, the British subjected them to ill treatment or maltreatment. One of them was the cell. This cell was meant for the female captives, those who resisted, those who fought back, were kept separately in this small cell. They kept so many of them in here. And again, you had to go to toilet, you had to urinate, you had to sleep, you had to do everything here. There was a door here, the door was actually locked. They passed food and water to them through the small space you see here. Another one was constructed for the men. Now, this time round, the men were executed through suffocation. They had this room without food, water. Many died as a result of that. And also, at this juncture, I will take this opportunity to tell you how the transatlantic slave trade was conducted. First of all, we should all understand this. Slavery existed in every civilization. Before the Europeans came, we had our own form of slavery. We called it the indentured servitude or the domestic slavery. So the thing is, we were not actually fighting people with the aim of getting slaves. That was it. The Atlantic slave trade was different. Now the aim was to capture Africans and sell them into slavery. So the one we practiced before the Europeans came, this is how it was conducted. I could fight a certain tribe. Maybe within my community or within my area, there was not enough food and water. The other area had enough food and water, and I want it. The only way I could get it was to fight my neighbor. So maybe I fight my neighbor, I defeat my neighbor, I now have access to the food and water. And I only treat the captured people as servants, not slaves, because at the end of the day, they maintained their name, their culture, and identity. I didn't change anything about them. The transatlantic slave trade was the opposite of what we practiced here. Now, tribes fought against tribes with the aim of getting enslaved Africans. So they got enslaved Africans through tribal wars or ethnic warfare. People were kidnapped. Towns and villages were raided. Wrongdoers in society were also sold off as enslaved Africans. The female dungeons. The female dungeons held more than 300 women at a time. We had two of them. We had this particular chamber or room, and we had the other chamber across. The women spent the same time here. The maximum days in the dungeons was about 3 months. For 3 months, women had to menstruate. They had to go to toilet. They had to vomit. They did everything here. You could imagine the diseases women were exposed to. And also don't forget, many of the enslaved women were raped by the Europeans who lived in these dungeons. Those who got pregnant as a result of that were taken away from these dungeons to the town to give birth. And after they had given birth, some of them returned as domestic slaves. Others stayed in the town. And apart from that also, some of the Europeans intermarried with the locals or the natives. And as a result of that, we had another race in Ghana we called the mixed race, or the mulattoes. The mulattoes or the mixed race, I would say, were a bit privileged in society than the real black people here. Because when Western or classroom education started, the mixed race children or the mulattoes were the first to be educated. When the schools were set up within the castles, these were the set of people who were educated. So that's how come in Ghana, especially along the coast, names like Johnson, Smith, Van der Poel, Van Dyke, Rudolph, Johnson are quite common. So basically these names are Portuguese names, Dutch, Danish, British, Swedish names. Yes. And also we have wreaths in remembrance of victims of the Atlantic slave trade. There's the infamous door of no return. This door, or this area, served as the final exit for all the enslaved Africans within this castle dungeon. They created a certain space for them. You know, the British could open the whole door like this for goods, but when the enslaved Africans were going through the store, only a portion of it was open. Only a portion like this was opened. So in a single file, you had to go through this, you had to bend down before. So finally they were taken to the shore, then to the ships. We shall follow their footsteps. Right, so through the door of no return, in chains and in shackles, gradually all the enslaved Africans were taken to the shore. As I mentioned earlier on, the ships berthed at some distance away. So there were smaller boats similar to these ones. So they moved them from here to join the ships. So at this moment, you either died on the way, or you made it to America, Jamaica, Barbados, Virgin Islands, Trinidad and Tobago, British Guyana, England, Europe. But when you look up on the same door, there is another inscription in quote. It says, "Door of Return." Door of Return. It's very symbolic. We had it there in 1998. 1998, Ghana celebrated the first Emancipation Day. So during the Emancipation Day celebration, brothers and sisters at the diaspora, those in America, Jamaica, Barbados, all over, many of them returned. And interestingly, they returned with two human remains of former enslaved Africans. One was taken from America, New York. His name was Samuel Carson. The other was taken from Kingston, Jamaica. Her name was Madam Crystal. The remains were shipped to Accra by air, and from Accra, they brought the remains to Cape Coast. They got to a town we call Abanze. So at Abanze they stopped. These same remains were placed on boats. So they took a boat ride from that end to the spot. They stopped. The remains were carried through the store to the courtyard, where we officially had the traditional funeral ceremony for them. After the traditional funeral ceremony, the two remains were reburied at a town we call Asan Manso. Asan Manso was one of the slave markets, and it's also part of the slave route from the north. So every year, every August, we celebrate Emancipation Day. And currently also we have other festivities like Panafest. We have Year of Return. We have Beyond Return. They all convey one message. The message is Africans home and Africans at the diaspora, we are bridging the gap. We are bridging the gap because for over 500 years we've been separated. It is more like they are hitting our heads against each other. At the diaspora, like in America, in Europe, they try to portray Africans, or they try to portray Africa negatively. And back home also, they portray our brothers and sisters there to us negatively. So when we have these festivities, brothers and sisters come home to see the reality on the ground. So as I mentioned, the message or the aim is to bridge the gap between Africa and the diaspora. So that is the reason behind Door of Return. And now this area is more of a fishing harbor for the natives. That is how come you find fishing boats with flags on them. You ask why the flags on the boat. It doesn't have any meaning, but it's just like maybe the boat owner or the canoe owner maybe support Chelsea. That's how come maybe you put the Chelsea flag. You can also see the Liverpool flag. You also see flags of political parties and countries. Yes. And also some centuries ago, this area was segregated. Let me put it that way. It was segregated. So this area was known as the European Beach. The European Beach. Today we have the same translation in Fanti. We call it Abrofo Mpuano. So it was a restricted area. The locals were not allowed in here. So there was a wall, or there was a pattern separating this end from the other end. And also I want to show you something. This door was only meant for the passage of goods and enslaved Africans only. When the Europeans were coming in and out of the castle, they preferred this brick staircase. They preferred this staircase. But today we all use Door of Return to say that, so the ground floor of this very block, or that block, was a storeroom. So they kept goods, both local and foreign merchandise were kept there. So one thing you need to understand is this: when the Europeans or when the British came here to purchase enslaved Africans, they didn't use currency. It was more of a barter trade. Unfortunately, the enslaved Africans were exchanged for goods like mirror, tobacco, alcoholic drinks, cloth, blanket, spoons, knives, guns, gunpowder. So some of these items the Europeans brought to exchange for enslaved Africans were kept at the ground floor of this building. The first floor and some part of the second floor were all apartments for the British merchants. The last end of the second floor was the Pallava Hall. The Pallava Hall was a slave market. We'll see the Pallava Hall briefly. I'm standing right in front of the condemned cell. The condemned cell was a death chamber. Enslaved Africans who tried to escape revolt in the dungeons were marched into the cell, and over there they were suffocated to death. They were there for days without food, water, light and air. All the doors were shut. So within some few days, the last person suffocated. It could be 5 enslaved Africans, it could be 10, it could be 20. So follow me, let's see the condemned cell. So the condemned cell had 3 doors. The first door, the second door was right here, and also the third door. So this is the inner chamber of the condemned cell. We're marched in here in chains and in shackles. The doors were shut. No water, no food, no air, nothing. You could imagine the pain and agony they endured before they died. So to the British, or to the oppressors, this was a sign of punishment. for anyone who tried to rebel. Well, this was to deter them from doing so. Pallava Hall, centuries back, this was a slave auction or the slave market. The word Pallava means, trouble or more of a noisy place. Yes, there was so much noise here. This particular room, the British merchants awaited their agent to supply them with enslaved Africans. So over here, they selected those who were fit and strong. So after they reached a deal, or after the enslaved Africans were bought, they were taken downstairs where they were branded. So after branding them, they kept them in the dungeons to await shipment. And as I always say, another form of oppression started right here in this room. Now somehow colonization in Ghana started here. In our history books, there's something we call the Bond of 1844. The Bond of 1844 was a treaty which was signed between 8 Fanti chiefs and the British. This led to the signing of the Bond of 1844. I'll talk about the Ashantis. So basically in Ghana is made up of tribes. We have Fantis, we have Ashantis, we have Dagomba, and we didn't have anything like Ghana. It was the Europeans who actually called this place Gold Coast, Guinea, etc. And some years ago, the Ashantis were the dominant tribe. The Ashantis controlled more than 50% of present-day Ghana. They were strong and mighty. And at some point in time, they were even beating the British in battles. The Ashantis wanted to control everything. They wanted to control the coast. They succeeded at Elmina, but here it was different. And basically, the people of Cape Coast also realized that there was no way they could fight the Ashantis and defeat. So they needed protection from the British. The British took opportunity and colonized. So this was a term. The British was more like, what do you have for me if I protect you? The British finally brought out their terms, and this was the terms on the side of the British, that they will accept British rule, or the locals will accept British protection for 100 years. So in turn, the British will protect these Fanti states against the Ashantis. So their leaders were called upon. On 6th March 1844, the bond was signed right here between the British. They were led by Commander Hill and George Maclean and others, and also the 8 Fanti leaders. So somehow the 8 Fanti states became part of the British protectorate. The British protected them from the Ashantis till the Ashantis were defeated. Around the 1800s, the Ashantis were now defeated. So the thing is, on paper, Ghana was supposed to gain independence on 6th March 1944. But unfortunately, it was delayed to 6th March 1957. So that is why we attained our independence on the same day the bond was signed. So we had independence on 6th March 1957. The bond was signed on 6th March 1844. So there's a trend. So Nkrumah was more like, okay, 6th March 1957, the bond is broken. Ghana is an independent state now. And also note, this area had the name the Gold Coast. When we had independence, the name Gold Coast was changed to Ghana. And Ghana also means the land of gold. So an empire existed called the Ghana Empire. That region is now Mali. They had a rich king by the name Mansa Musa. Until date, Mansa Musa is the richest man ever to live on this earth. He had so much wealth in gold. On top of the hill was Fort William. As a result of the attacks the British received from its competitors, they built Fort William to protect it against anyone who dared or who tried to attack them. So the thing is, when you are up on the fort, you can see about 90% of Cape Coast. So before anybody approached the castle, before any group or any ship, they had men at the tower of the fort watching. Anything unusual, they sent signals using flags, mirrors and torches. So right here within the castle, they had the communications room where someone would receive the signal. So if the signal meant that the castle was under attack, they called upon the soldiers. So that was a garrison for the British soldiers. So they called upon the soldiers to get the guns ready and defend this building in case. Later on, when the British left, the same fort was used as a lighthouse. It is also part of the Ghana Museum, so it's for the Ghana Museums of Monument Board. It's also open to the public. People can also go there and visit. Also, you find some churches. Closer to the castle, we have the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. So Christianity in Ghana started within the slave dungeons or the slave castles. Later, they relocated these churches outside. So I can say for a fact that in terms of structure, that is the first Anglican church in Ghana. Over there also to my right, in terms of structure again, that is the first Methodist church this country had. And up there, we have the Catholic Church. So we call the center Chapel Square. Right. So we'll move on to the governor's apartment. This is one of the halls in Cape Coast Castle. The British called it Maclean's Hall. And interestingly, this room is the first court of justice in the country. Because when the British came, at some point in time they colonized and they exerted their influence on us. So if there was a civil or a criminal case, it was presided over right here in this room. So this hall was named after one of its judges called Captain George Mclean. So Captain George Mclean was a judicial assessor or a judge. So when he died, this place was named after him. So that's the Maclean's Hall. So this was the communications room. So here, the British soldiers picked the signals from the fort. So when you look through this hole, you can see straight to the fort. So when they picked the signal and it meant that the castle was under siege or under attack, they quickly informed the soldiers to take up arms and defend it. So we are right in front of the governor's apartment. Now at some point in time, when Ghana was colonized, Cape Coast served as the capital city of the then Gold Coast. Cape Coast Castle served as the administration for the British government here. But later, on 19th March 1877, the British removed the capital from Cape Coast to Accra. So we shall have a look at the governor's bedroom and sitting room. So this was a sitting room or the living room for the governor. And this, the bedroom. Behind me was the Church of England. or the first Anglican church we had in this country. So when the British officials or merchants came, that is where they worshipped. And again, one Ghanaian by the name Reverend Philip Kwaku also served as a minister for this church. And underneath the church was the male slave dungeons. Closer to the entrance, we have another thing. So in the male dungeons, the British created spy holes. So this led to the spy hole. So it actually means that whoever passed by to worship, to praise God or to pray, could see, could hear and smell whatever was going on in the male dungeons. And whilst the captives or whilst the enslaved Africans were in the dungeons also, they heard whatever was going on in the church. The church served as a classroom at the same time. But when the British left, we turned it into a children's library. We had this plaque in 1992 when Ghana first celebrated Panafest, that's Pan-African Historical Festival. So during the celebration, this one was put here on behalf of the Traditional Council. So basically, it's on behalf of every Ghanaian, because every Ghanaian, one way or the other, belongs to a certain traditional society. It is here to say that we are sorry for whatever we did to support with the transatlantic slave trade, so that such evil never repeat again. So it reads, "In everlasting memory of the anguish of our ancestors, may those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. May humanity never again perpetrate such injustice against humanity. We, the living, vow to uphold this." So, in all, a lot of atrocities and inhumane treatment existed here some centuries back. We should draw lessons from this and stay united and make the world a better place for all of us to live in, regardless of your race, your color, your language, or your ethnicity. Our tour will end here. Once again, my name is Justice Hobina Aqua.
Okay, this is your tour guide, Michael Kojo Lanes. I work with Torchlight Tours, and today we are very lucky. We are continuing with our tour of Cape Coast. Where we are now is the Kakum National Park, famous for the Canopy Walkway. So today we're going to do a lot of AC side. I'm very excited because at the end of the day, I'm going to burn some fat in me. So today we will hike, and after we're going to be on the Canopy Walkway. But guess what? We are very lucky to have in our midst one of the best guides at the Kakum National Park. His name is Chris. So anytime you happen to come to Kakum National Park, make sure you ask for the guide, Chris. He will give you that exquisite, the best of tour of Kakum National Park. So please, I'll leave it to him. He's going to lead the tour from here going. So please listen to him and do the exercise along with us. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to Kakum Conservation Area. That's the real name of the park because it is made up of two forest reserves. We have the Asin Attendancy Forest Reserve and we have the main Kakum Forest Reserve. We put the two together, we call this area Kakum Conservation Area. So join me as I take you through the walk to the famous Canopy Walkway. So the journey to the famous Canopy Walkway is just about to begin. What we are seeing now is bamboo. So over here at Kakum National Park, we have imported bamboo from Asia, and bamboo is a grass, so bamboo is not a tree, and bamboo is one of the fastest growing plants we have in the world. Anytime you get close to it, you hear the creaking sound. That tells you that bamboo is growing. Yeah? Let me tell you more about the way to the bridge. This is the way to the bridge. The first part is we are going on a very steep hill, about 200 meters above sea level. So we are going up, but whilst we are going up, we have resting spots. So if you think you are tired, you just have to take a rest, then we continue. The floor is like this, so I will entreat you to be mindful with your next step. Thank you. So you are welcome once again. I'm welcoming you again because this is where the national park actually starts from. So it starts from here to this side. So this is the primary forest and this is the secondary forest. As I said earlier on, the park is made up of 2 forest reserves. We have the Asin Atendensu Forest Reserve and we have the main Kakum Forest Reserve. You put the 2 together, we are talking about 36,000 hectares of forest, or over 89,000 acres of forest. That's how big the national park is. And Kakum is the 4th biggest national park we have in Ghana. Ghana has 7 national parks. The biggest is the Mole National Park, and Kakum is the 4th biggest national park we have in Ghana. Before I continue, let me tell you some of the other products that we have here at Kakum National Park. When we come to Kakum, we have what we call tree house. In towns, they call it restaurant or hotel. We also have a hotel on top of a tree over here, where you can spend some quality nights in the jungle. And it is very, very affordable. Yeah, you can sleep over, you can sleep more than 2-3 days, 1 week. You can spend so many time here. And I recommend the tree house services for you because in the tree house, in the night, you go for night hiking. It is that time you are going to see most of the wild animals that we have here. This signpost is just welcoming you to this area, telling you the name of this area, Kakum Conservation Area, and this area is managed by the Forestry Commission of Ghana. And under the Forestry Commission of Ghana, we have a division which is in charge of all the 21 protected areas we have in Ghana. That's the Wildlife Division of the Forestry Commission. Then the last signpost, this is just giving you the distance. So from where I am standing to where the tree house is 765 meters away, and from where I'm standing to the famous walkway is 205 meters. So we are almost halfway through. This time around, we are not going to climb, we are not going to go up. We are just going to walk through the jungle. That's the main Kakum Conservation Area. Before we do that, let me tell you some of the wild animals you are going to see when you are lucky. The key word here is lucky, because it's not often that you see wild animals during this time of the day. They are mostly active in the night. The biggest wild animal we have here is the forest elephant, and we have many of them residing in this forest. Then we have the monkeys, we have the duikers, we call them antelopes. We have a lot of snakes, we have the pangolins, we have the porcupines, we have the lizards, we have a lot of birds, we have a lot of butterflies. They are all here at Kakum Conservation Area. As for trees, we have 57 different types of trees over here. 57. And as the tour wears on, I'm going to show you some of the trees that we have over here at Kakum Conservation Area. Thank you. As I said earlier on, I said Kakum is noted for 57 different types of trees over here. One of them is over here. This is the Esa tree. Esa, E-S-A, Esa tree. And the botanical name is Celtis mebredi. This is one of the good timbers we have in the world. And Esa has a very beautiful buttresses. And some of the buttresses of most of the trees also serve as home to most of the wild animals that we have here. In Ghana, Esa tree is used to pound the fufu. When it is very small, we use Esa timber to pound the fufu. So here at Kakum, our biggest product is the famous walkway. And now we are just at the entrance of the famous Walkway. This is where the walkway starts. So if you want to go on the walkway to see upper layers of the rainforest, this is where it all begins. So let's take a walk inside so that I'll show you everything you need to know about the walkway. Then we do it, come back. Before we get to the walkway, I have to show you a very beautiful tree over here, which is supporting the walkway. The first tree supporting the walkway, we call it Danta. Forgive me, most of the timbers here have local names because they are only found over here. So Danta is the name of this timber. One of the timbers, 8 timbers supporting the famous Canopy Walkway. Before civilization, this timber was being used as a chewing stick to clean our teeth. And in Ghana, we use this timber too as mortar, the one we pound our local food in it. So this tree is also a very good timber, a hard timber that supports the famous Canopy Walkway. So let's climb up and do the walkway. We are about to begin to walk across the famous Canopy Walkway, the only walkway in a rainforest in the whole of Africa. As you can see, this walkway has been around since 1995. It was officially opened to the general public on 29th April 1995 by Ghana's former president, Jerry John Rawlings. So he was the first person to walk across this famous Canopy Walkway. It was built by 2 Canadians, Tom and John, who were assisted by 6 Ghanaians. So it took them 6 months. So they started around 11 September. So by the following year, 1995, the whole walkway was done. 6 months. And materials they use are, we have nylon ropes. Some are very new, as you can see. We have nets. We have steel rod on top. Then we have ladder at the base, and we have wooden board supporting. This is where you walk. Originally, the design was for 7 walkways or 7 hanging bridges. In the early part of 2000, we just added an 8th bridge. The 8th bridge is serving as a bypass for those who are scared of heights. When they are done with the first bridge, they turn left. Turning left means you are walking across 3 of the bridges. But turning right means you are going to walk across 7 hanging bridges. The total length of the bridges is 350 meters, but the highest point is 40 meters or a little over 130 feet, and the lowest point is 11 meters. On the bridge, it wobbles and it creaks, so you are going to hear a lot of creaking sound noise coming out from the bridge. And after each bridge, we have a platform. After each bridge, we have a platform. The platform is serving as a breather or a resting point. So when you walk across a bridge, you take a breath or you wait and you continue on the next bridge. Waiting means you are relaxing, you are gathering momentum. You are overcoming your fears, because not many visitors walk across all the 7 bridges if you are scared of height. So if you are scared of height, we have yours. That's the left 3 bridges for you. Yes. So it has been around since 95, so 25 years, and still we are maintaining it. Somebody will ask, what is the maintenance culture of the bridge? We do maintain it almost every day, but we do major maintenance every 6 months. So the bridge is very, very safe. One of the safest bridges we have in the world. As you walk, you will notice what I am telling you. It's very safe. So I entreat everybody, anywhere, just come over. Let's have fun walking across the famous Canopy Walkway.
All right, so you can see how we hike from the base to the top now. And now we're going to enjoy the Canopy Walkway. So you're going to see how we're going to walk on the bridges. And we recommend to you, anytime you come to Kakum, I'm sure you're going to do all the 7 bridges, not 3. Yes, so we look forward to welcoming you to Kakum National Park. And when you come, remember to look for Chris. He'll give you the best of Kakum National Park tour. Thank you so much.